Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March Speakers Night for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Toronto Centre. I'm the President, Ralph Chu, and it's a pleasure to see you here. The last meeting, unfortunately, was cancelled due to bad weather, and so we're playing a little bit of catch-up, but for tonight we do have a Speakers Night, and I'll be calling on our Vice President, I'm having a brain fart tonight, Paul Delaney, to introduce our speaker in a few moments. I'm thinking about two different things, and I'm finding that as I approach the senior years, multitasking is not something I can do very easily anymore. But anyway, one thing that I'd like to point out to everybody here tonight, we do have a card on the table that we had hoped to have here at the last meeting. It's a sympathy card for the family of Wayne Gilbank, who is one of our members who passed away in February. And so I'd ask you to sign that if you get a chance after the meeting tonight. In the meantime, I did have a message passed along to me through Phil Chow from Wayne's partner, Sue Woolsey, up in Collingwood. And she wrote, "Because Wayne's service has been delayed to April 18th here in Collingwood, and I most likely won't get to see many of you, I wanted to take this time to convey how important you have been to Wayne during the past years. He came to the hobby late in life and was so happy to learn all he could about imaging, as he knew his time was limited. I can't tell you how much joy you added to his experience. You were also ready to help him gain more knowledge, and your friendship often went above and beyond. I would watch his eyes sparkle as he spoke of all of you, and his enthusiasm was boundless. Your friendship was such a wonderful gift to him. Again, thank you so very much for all you gave to both of us. Blessings and clear skies, Susan Woolsey." So a few of us will try to get up to Collingwood for the memorial when it's held in April. And again, if you want to put a message on the card, please feel free to do so. Okay, so before I call on Paul, is there anybody here for the first time tonight at all? Okay, so everybody's here and is familiar with what goes on. That's good. All right, so I'll call upon Paul to come up and introduce our speaker, and I'm just going to slip next door and say hello to our new members who are at the first light session. So Paul, without ado. I'll be back shortly.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Okay, try that again. Good evening, everybody. As Ralph indicated, Paul Delaney, Second Vice President. My pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening. Since October of 2018, Jenna Hinds has been the Youth Outreach Coordinator for the RASC's National Office. Where are we going here? She leads the Robotic Telescope Project and runs nationwide astronomy outreach and outreach training programs. Busy woman. She's a prolific engager of social media. Any of you who are on the Twitterverse will be very familiar with her broadcasts. Is an avid photographer and a naturalist. She received her master's degree in science communication and public outreach from the University of Edinburgh. I've now made an appointment to talk Scotch with her. And a bachelor's degree in biology from Mount Allison University. She enjoys rock climbing and playing science songs on the ukulele. Interesting. Personally, I've never met a jellyfish I didn't like, but we will hear all about jellyfish she has known. Jenna.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Paul. Am I okay here? Yes? Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, Paul. And I didn't realize that you wanted to talk Scotch specifically. I actually, only about 70% of the reason I moved to Scotland was for Scotch. The rest was for the program. So, hi everybody, and I'm Jenna. I came to astronomy from a really interesting angle, but before I get into any of how I got here, I did want to ask you all a question first, which is, what are your earliest memories of time or of space? Because I find that almost everybody has some early memory from when they were a kid, and I realize it's kind of hard to see you guys. Is there anyone who has an early memory from when they were? Oh, thank you. there we go. Look at you all. An early memory from their childhood of space. Yeah. Well,
Sitting on the shore of a lake where I used to camp with my uncle, who is a member of this society, but isn't here tonight, and having him point out constellations to me.
Oh, lovely. That's wonderful. It's so nice to have those memories of when you're young. Anybody else have any memories from their childhood? Yeah.
Just growing up back home in Newfoundland and seeing the Milky Way all the time.
Oh, you lucky people with all of your lack of light pollution.
I'll add a southern hemisphere perspective to all of that. It was very early on looking up and going, what is that? And it was actually the Southern Cross, so Alpha and Beta Centaurus, and finding out that they were the closest stars other than our sun. So.
Oh, amazing. Oh, fantastic. I love hearing stories of people's experiences when they were younger. I do find that it really brings everybody together. Oftentimes when we are inspired by space, it's when we're quite young. My memories of my youth, I don't have any photos of this time, but that's my cottage. And at my cottage, we used to spend a lot of time lying on the dock, and we'd also go and visit my grandparents in Florida. And both of those times, we would gaze at the stars. And my parents didn't know any constellations beside Orion. So we got really familiar with Orion, and then we just guessed at everything else. And so I could identify Orion's belt at the age of 5, and then I just made up other ones, like Orion's car battery, and Orion's chair, and Orion's hat. And really, honestly, is that not what the constellations are already? They're all kind of a little made up. I also had a very strong belief, for some reason, at quite a young age, actually until quite an older age, probably about 10 or so, that all the stars were painted on a canvas that was exactly 2 kilometers up. I'm not sure why I knew 2 kilometers specifically, but I was absolutely sure of it, until I, of course, learned that that is absolutely not the case. So now, all those misconceptions solved. I now do a whole bunch of space outreach. This is an event that I was at with a bunch of volunteers from Toronto Centre, actually, at the ROM a couple weeks ago. And we were doing some lunar sketching with it. It was lovely. But that's not where I started. I actually started, as Paul mentioned briefly, I did a degree in marine biology earlier than that. And back on the UK front, I started knee-deep in tide pools. This is the best tide pool around. This is near Bamburgh Castle in the north of England. It's a fantastic one. I'm the one in the pink. And I spent a lot of time crawling around and digging up critters. I also spent a lot of time in touch tanks, grabbing critters, as you can see. Quite an affinity for hermit crabs. So when I was a kid, when I was about that age, I found out that there was an actual job for a scuba diver to go and pick up animals for the touch tank from the ocean. And that was my dream job. I wanted to be that diver. Of course, I didn't do that, but that's okay. I've done some other cool stuff. It did inspire me enough to go and do scuba diving as a big part of my hobbies and eventually as some of my research. I learned to dive when I was 14, and then I went and did my undergrad in marine biology. I did pay my dues on the mud flats of St. Andrews, New Brunswick, in minus 28 degrees. So I did the terrible marine biology so that I could do the fun marine biology. So this was down on a research trip to the Caribbean in Bonaire. That was where I did most of my research. And I'm going to briefly talk about my research because you've given me a platform and I love the ocean. So this is Bonaire, tilted so that it's correctly angled for what's north and south. And when the wind comes across the ocean and hits Bonaire, it hits the eastern side of it. So it comes from the east and moves west. Because of that, the eastern side of Bonaire is really battered. It's big, craggy cliffs and high waves, and there's no coral growing on that side because coral just doesn't grow in conditions like that. The coral all grows on the leeward side, on the west side. And all along there, it's this big, long, fringing reef. It goes all the way down. It's absolutely gorgeous. This place has been protected for probably about 30 years now. But back in the early 2000s, because of human impact and climate change, things got a little dicey. Usually the hurricanes came from east to west, as they all typically still do. There was a hurricane that came through that went west to east. And because of that change in the climate and that change in direction, a whole bunch of coral got destroyed on the leeward side when it shouldn't have been destroyed. So my research in university was looking at that one particular type of coral as a measure for how the reef was rebounding. That coral is staghorn coral, or Acroporus cervicornis. And it's doing so well. Look at that. I was so excited when I found that colony. I was so excited. This stuff grows really fast compared to a lot of corals. So this grows at about 10 centimeters a year. So oftentimes people use it to rebuild reefs. So this is where sort of all my passion kicked off. And I did get to go on some really cool trips and meet, actually, so this isn't technically a jellyfish, this is a coral. They do have similar similar defense mechanisms, where they have like tiny harpoons that shoot neurotoxins into your skin. It's really great. Nematocysts is what they're called. But I did get to go on a different trip. I got to go to Sable Island, where I met a lovely jellyfish, and I'm going to throw in a picture of horses because that's what everybody expects. Lovely horses. Then I met comb jellyfish, which I was really excited about. These little guys are only about the size of grapes, and they're really cool. This is a shot in broad daylight, so you can't really see it, but when it's darker and it's just a single angle of light, they have these pretty little rainbow things down their sides. They're like little cilia, they're little legs that help them swim, and as they swim, they send these little rainbows down either side of them. I'm very fond of that jellyfish. Onto a different jellyfish. This one I actually only made a mental connection with it recently. This was on a trip in Florida where I went to an underwater research facility. And so you had to dive to get there. You had to dive into a lagoon under a little pod, and then you came up through a portal and into this research lab. And I need to point with the pointer, which I didn't practice with. I'm not sure where it is. There we go. So in this jar over here, there's a jellyfish called Cassiopeia. And the reason it's called the Cassiopeia jellyfish, do you guys know the story of the whole, Cassiopeia is upside down in the stars because she was too vain and she needed to be shown how to be humble? That jellyfish sits upside down on the ocean floor. I had no idea that was why it was called the Cassiopeia jellyfish. This is what it looks like. And it, instead of floating as you would normally see in the water column, it flips upside down, sits on the bottom. These things blend in with the grass in the background. This is called turtle grass, seagrass, or thalassia. And they'll sit down there and catch little critters through there. I have been stung by a great number of these. And in fact, even at this particular lab, I touched the Cassiopeia jellyfish. It's not so bad when you touch your hand because your hand has pretty thick skin. And I went, haha, that was cool. Rubbed it on the towel, rubbed the towel on my leg. Yep, bad idea, don't do that. I did still love the stars throughout my whole undergrad degree, and I was really lucky to go to a very small school in small town New Brunswick, so I did escape the lights of the city and get to see the stars without any light pollution. And I also, luckily, I'm not an astrophotographer, to be clear, I'm not particularly good at this, and this is from 2012, so cut me some slack. I was lucky to have very supportive and nerdy friends who, when I said, hey, it's exam season, it's 11 o'clock at night, who wants to come out with me to the middle of the salt marsh and take pictures of the stars? Many of them came with me. We had about 6 of them. I was really impressed. You can see 3 of them jumping around on hay bales. What do you do in small towns, right? And then I got my first picture of the Big Dipper. Isn't it lovely up there? I got even better even throughout the night. This isn't stacked or anything. I got better even throughout the night, and I got Orion there, right out there. Not bad, not bad. Even foreground, look at that. Right, not too bad. At this time. Yeah, Betelgeuse is bright, look at it. I had no idea things were going to change. I didn't even know it was a variable star. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything. All I knew was that was Orion. Back to that whole 5-year-old Jenna being like, oh yes, Orion's belt, I see that. Where's Orion's car? Is it over here? No? Down there? No? So I loved marine biology, and I still love marine biology, but I found that I was just not a very good scientist. That was the problem, is that I never made up data, but I got real close. So I stopped doing science, and I went off and did science communication instead in England. I left out that entire year because I didn't do anything related to marine biology or anything related to space, and so it didn't seem that important. It was fun. I did cool stuff. I worked with the zoo, and I worked with the neuroscience facility there, so I learned all about brains and stuff. But after that, I came back, and to my true passion, I actually came here. I was a host at the Science Center. And I found out recently that, Ralph, you were a host too, wherever Ralph was gone. That's so exciting. So I was a host here at the Science Center. And I loved that job. That job was great. It was perfect coming out of a degree in science communication where you don't know what you're doing and you just want to practice. And you got to go you got to go out on the floor, you got to try cool stuff, you got to learn new things. I did naturally gravitate towards the animals. So that's Henry. He's lovely. He's a ball python. He's probably about 15 now. Sweet. You should come by sometime. And leading up to this point, I had done a little bit of work with wildlife before. I'd worked with, worked doing wildlife rehabilitation. And it just so happened that at the Science Center, I did throw in some photos because they're cute. That's a northern flying squirrel. He's the cutest of the animals I worked with. And there's a groundhog. The Science Center had an exhibit on wildlife rehabilitation. And it just so happened that about a month prior to the exhibit coming in, a hawk flew into one of our windows, and we watched it fly into the window. And so we knew that it had gotten hurt, and it flew off, and it sat by the parking lot, and we were kind of like it's standing on one leg. It's looking okay. I'm going to go out and see how it's doing. And I walked out, and it flew away, and I was like, okay, if it flies away, usually the animal's all right. So we kind of left it. We kept an eye on it for the next month or so. We'd seen it standing around on the ground and on top of the bird feeder, like, where did they all go? Why'd they leave? Should be easy. And that wasn't quite doing quite as well as the other hawks in the area. And then, luckily, on one day, two girls were walking down behind the Science Center, and they saw a hawk fall out of the sky and onto the ground. And then they went and told one of my coworkers, who came and found me and said, Jenna, what are you going to do about it? And I said, great, let's go get it. That was not what I was supposed to say. But we did. We did go get it. And this is what the end result was. Is the hawk in a Science Center lab coat. I was wearing oven mitts, not technically PPE, but still. And then we tossed it in a box, and I took it to the wildlife center. There's my supervisor there. I don't think I was supposed to let anyone know that I did this and that she was okay with it. So you're not supposed to do this. And I found that out the next day. A lot of my career has been, hey, you want to do this thing? And me being like, yeah, sure, what could go wrong? And that's what this was. I thought, here's a problem. I'm going to solve the problem. I have the experience. I feel comfortable with this. This will be fine. And then my manager sat me down, and she said, so I'm sure you knew this was coming. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you really shouldn't be picking up hawks on work time. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess not, eh? And she's like, yeah, no, it's dangerous. You're not supposed to be doing that. And I was like, yeah, well, sorry. And she said, I had a supervisor who was an ornithologist, and she's like, I spoke to the ornithologist, and she said, you probably didn't even consider it. And I was like, yeah, no, it literally hadn't occurred to me. She's like, so now that I've told you, you won't do it again, will you? And I'm like, no, I'll do it again. She's like, okay, well, now you know. She was like, I understand. I had to have this conversation. It was one of my more fun experiences at the Science Center. And because of this sort of instinct to just kind of say, yeah, I mean, how bad could it be? I ended up doing a lot of really cool stuff. I got to go on live TV. And this was the animal room fellow, the one who takes care of our animals, came up to me at a presentation, and he said, I don't want to drive into the studio tomorrow. Do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. And he's like, you have media experience, right? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, you'll be fine on live TV, whatever. And in fact, the person who was in charge of our media relations even said to me in the car on the way there while I had all these animals with me, you've been media trained, right? And I was like, no. He's like, I'm fine. It's like, great. I didn't mess up. That was good. I got the opportunity to bring my life truly full circle and back to touch tanks, and I got to host a touch tank on live TV, which was the best day of my life. It was so great. Except for that 8-year-old in the back dropped the brittle star on live TV. But luckily, I don't really process these things in the moment, so I was just like, oh, yep, okay, no problem, back in the tank. Here's another thing. It's fine, everything's fine. Everything's great. It was a really cool way to wrap up that part of my life and to really get to come full circle on all of the marine biology stuff. But the ultimate part of being a host is being a planetarium host. That was the coolest thing you could possibly be. Yes, it was so cool. You got the number 7 key, and the number 7 key was special. It let you into the planetarium. That meant they trusted you with a room that wasn't surveilled, so you could nap if you wanted to. I didn't. I definitely didn't. Nope. There was a host that was once caught living there. Oh. Yeah. That was a secret. This is being broadcast. Don't come for me, Science Center. So I didn't take any photos in the planetarium. This is from away, but I did get the chance to do planetarium stuff. I had no experience in space. I was still not figuring out the constellations. I had no idea what was going on, but my boss somehow trusted me to do this and just kind of went, off you go. Best of luck. And I could not have asked for a better way to learn. It was so cool because so many people come into outreach because they care so deeply about space. They want to share it with everybody. I did not come in on that angle. I didn't know anything, but I got the chance to learn. And I got the chance to learn with a world that I could control around me, which was the coolest way I could have learned. So we spent hours and hours just playing with planetarium software and flying out of the galaxy and seeing how the superclusters are structured. And I did that in shows too, and I almost made like 3 people throw up because I'm not a good pilot. Shouldn't have been allowed to do that. I didn't ask for permission. I asked for forgiveness. It was fine. And in those shows, what I always told people was I always really liked the winter season because we would do the sky that evening, and the winter season had Orion. And everyone likes Orion. No one's mad at Orion. And I would always show people the constellation and how you could see, and if you go to a dark sky, you can see the Orion Nebula. It's really exciting, but you got to go to a dark sky. And then I was walking home one night, and I live right along Riverdale Park, which is a really good spot to observe. There aren't a ton of artificial lights around. And I was walking along and looking up, and oh, wait a second! That's the Orion Nebula! I'm like looking around for people and being like, somebody, that's the Orion! You can see the Orion Nebula! Can you not see that? Yeah, so that's how I got the title of crazy person in my apartment building. Yeah. But I was so excited. It was so exciting. The rest of my planetarium shows were like, oh my God, guys, you can go outside right now. You can go see the, go there tonight. And it worked at some point, because I'll bring up that I have the photo sitting there of the Orion Nebula. It worked at some point because I actually my boss got a letter saying, Jenna's planetarium show encouraged us to go find Orion and see the Orion Nebula. So it worked for at least one person, that violent passion. And with learning all of this stuff about space and getting more exposed to sort of that world and not just the world of wildlife and such, I got even cooler experiences. I got to host an episode of Science Max where we did lunar landers and it was essentially the egg drop challenge, but with pumpkins. And we got to see how we could make things not break when they land, which is sort of how we used to do outreach with getting rovers to land on Mars, that sort of thing. We're not going to watch that. My boss, when he found out earlier this week that I did this, and he made us watch the entire episode. So we're not going to relive that experience. That's enough. If you want to see it, it's on YouTube. It was a lot of fun. It was really neat to get the opportunity to give it a try. And then finally, after all of this learning about space and getting more in touch with thinking about non-Earth-based things, although I did still have bring out the snake for solar observing one day. That's Henry there. I did get to meet the RASC Toronto Center. You guys all come here on Saturdays, and we do outreach and talk about space. And so I got pretty familiar with everyone who's out there. I brought out Henry, and then I found out that the RASC had a job opening. And I asked the volunteers if they knew anything about it, and they're like, National has staff? What? And so that should have been an indicator for what National was like. And I applied, and I got the job, and now I get to do space stuff all the time. The coolest part about all this is that, first of all of you guys are wonderful. I got to go inside the 74-inch telescope at the DDO on my second week on the job. So this is not a super clear photo. But what you can see, so there's my phone and my jacket, and then the back of Jeff Booth, and then the front of Jeff Booth, and then there's Chris. It was Halloween, by the way, just to be clear. So you can see this is the telescope back here. I don't even own a telescope. I still don't own a telescope. I just use everybody else's because there's so many people who have them. But to be able to stand inside one and stand up inside one, not have to crouch or anything, that was so cool. It was the coolest way to enter working in this job. Ian Wheelband took this photo of me being the happiest kid on earth to be standing in a telescope. I got to do a bunch of other stuff. I got to do a bunch of outreach with a bunch of Toronto Centre volunteers at the DDO. This was when Paul and I met. We met on the roof of the York parking lot in -40 in January. Yeah, it was cold. We were doing the lunar eclipse. We had this whole plan to do live photos of the moon, and I was going to tweet them, and it was going to be great. And then it was going to be from our telescope in California, and it was cloudy in California, and it was not cloudy in Toronto. And so my boss was like, well, you got to do something. And so there we were. All of my electronics stopped after an hour. They all died. And my brain kind of turned off too. I had to give an interview on TV. I forgot to even say that I was with the RASC. I was just like, yeah, let's talk about the lunar eclipse. It's going to be great. Everything's great. It's not -40. Everything's fine. So it was a rough one. I never went and looked for the link for that, and I don't feel like you need to either. And after that, I got to do some really cool stuff. This was the pinnacle of my 2 worlds of marine biology and space coming together. I got to go to the Neutral Buoyancy Lab at the Johnson Space Center. oh yeah, you guys almost lost me. Oh man, as soon as I got there, I was like, where do I give my application in? I just want to live underwater and hang out with astronauts. That was probably one of the cooler things that I got to do. And then here's our last shot. This was after the General Assembly in 2019. We were pretty excited. It was the last tour. Everything was done. It was a beautiful sunny day. Oh, it was fantastic. Coming to this, though, from such an odd place, such a disjointed place, coming to astronomy from somewhere where I'd already had to teach people about it, meant that I got a whole bunch of astronomical firsts, like way later in my life. One of them, in terms of astronomy first, my favorite, and if anyone hasn't done this yet, I'm sure you're all very experienced, and I'm sure you've already done this, but was finding the Andromeda galaxy in binoculars. So I didn't even know you could use binoculars to observe. And then I found out from one of our volunteers that that's actually a really good way to do things. It's cheaper, it's easier to hold on to, it's better for kids because it's more intuitive. So I went up to my cottage and I stole my dad's binoculars and I sat on the front lawn and I looked for Andromeda for 10 minutes. And I eventually found it and I immediately put the binoculars down and went, that was a fluke, and then tried it again. Just to make sure I could still find it. And I did, and it was the coolest day, and I couldn't stop talking about it to anyone who would listen to me, and I'm doing it all to you again. Oh, it's so great. This photo is actually only from September, and there's Ian Wheelband. Again, this is because, since I don't own a telescope, I had no experience with this, but luckily Ian believed in me. He set up a telescope and then said, there you go, Jenna, you do it. I was like, okay. Sure, yeah, it's pointing. How hard is pointing? And I did eventually, like, just after sunset, I knew where the planets were, and I knew that Saturn was up and it was going to be going down. And so I found Saturn in it, and then to be able to not only find Saturn, but see it through the scope in which you have found it was so satisfying. I know everybody talks about their first experience with Saturn and seeing it through a telescope and that being that super emotional moment, but finding it myself was like, oh, I feel capable. That doesn't happen that often. And then I immediately taught a kid how to do it so that he could do it and I could talk about space. It was perfect, yeah. So after that, that was a big first for me, especially since it had been nearly a full year since I'd been working here. So really I should have been better at that by that point. This was an exciting first. It's not gonna look that great, I'm gonna preface it, but I'm very proud of it. It was the first astro photo I ever took. Now, to be clear, I do not have the equipment to do this. This was while I was trying to learn what astrophotography was using this robotic telescope that we have, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So I managed to get like 3 photos of the bubble nebula or something like that, like nothing huge, one for each color, and then the luminance one, and I put it together, and then there were colors, and it was so cool. It made that out of black and white photos. It was a great day. I was so thrilled. And I posted it on social media, and luckily I don't have that many astronomer friends on social media. And so they were like, yeah, that looks incredible. It's totally great. There were like 1 or 2 people who were like, I mean, it could be better. But it was still such a big moment for me during being able to process that first image. And then in terms of saying yes to stuff and just to kind of, we'll see how it goes. I had probably the biggest, what could go wrong kind of moment. Just last year in November, one of my friends said, who we had not been friends for very long, he was like, hey, you want to go to Jordan? And I was like, sure. I mean, okay. I mean, I don't get that many offers to go to Jordan. I'd love to go to Jordan. Jordan seems really cool. It was right over the transit of Mercury. And so I was already feeling terrible because I was supposed to be doing all the social media and producing content and releasing stuff, and I was going to have to just bail on all that. It didn't even occur to me that I might be able to see it. But then, since I was bailing on that, I was like, well, I should try to see if there's anybody out there in the Jordanian world who's interested in astronomy. I'm sure there's someone. And so I did a bunch of Googling, and I found someone, and it turned out he was the vice president of the Jordanian Astronomical Society, and he was like, oh my God, I'm so excited you're coming. Let's meet up. And I was like, all right, I got 3 hours before I start my trip, and 3 hours at the end. Do those times work? And he did say yes, and we met up in the lobby of the hotel 5 minutes after I got in. So that was after 24 hours of travel. I was a mess. His name is Dr. Ammar Sakashi, and that's Adli there. Fantastic, wonderful people. I brought them the Observer's Handbook and some other stuff from the Society office, and their first reaction was, come out to dinner with us. And I was like, I have meetings, I'm sorry. And they're like, great, okay, fine, come to the Mercury transit. And I was like, oh, that hadn't occurred to me. I had brought like Mylar and binoculars and was hoping to make something and maybe I'd be able to see something. But they were doing an event just down the street, and so they said, why don't you come to that? And I said, it's going to be ending at 4 o'clock, and I'm getting in at 2 o'clock that day, and like, and he was like, no, it's going to be great. You're going to come. It'll be great. And so I said, well, we'll see what'll happen. And now, because Jordan's pretty, I'm going to go through some of the photos that we took on our trip, which was not well timed with space, unfortunately. There was a waxing gibbous moon the entire time, so I could not get nice photos of space, but it did mean nice photos of Jordan. You can see the moon there, and some of the stars. It was beautiful, absolutely magical. Got back to go back and see it in the daytime, which was also gorgeous. Yeah, place is big. And then I met a cat and at the monastery. It was a good day. We actually got to go see where The Martian was filmed. So this is Wadi Rum. There's not this one, although it was beautiful. This is a rock that was actually in The Martian. So if you rewatch it, look for that particular setup. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful country. It was fantastic. I was really sad that all of the nice dry desert air was occupied by a full moon. But we still got to actually sleep outside one of the nights. So that was our bed there. And this was in a camp. And the moon set at about 3 in the morning. And so from 3 in the morning till like 6 in the morning when we got on camels, I didn't sleep a wink. I spent the whole time looking at the stars and trying to convince everybody else sleeping around me that they should be doing the same thing, which I was not a popular person. So we made it back to Amman. We took this big long route, and we just pulled in eventually right at 2 o'clock. And at this point, actually, that girl there and I had become friends, and so she had really been inspired by space when she was a kid, and she'd never seen a planetary transit, so she wanted to go and take a look at stuff. So we hiked. Amman's really cool. It's built on 7 hills, and so we were on one hill here, and there was another hill here. This is where the Citadel was. This is where the hotel was. So we had to go down 10 flights of stairs, over like 200 feet, and then up 10 flights of stairs. But we made it just in time. We got to see Mercury projected. I know it's really tiny, but it was really exciting. It's the first planetary transit I've ever seen. So this is my biggest astronomical first, also on the other side of the world. It was very cool. They had cameras set up. They had binoculars set up. I got to speak with their youngest member, who was the cutest kid in the world. It's Dana. She was 7 years old. She didn't speak any English, but we still had a lovely conversation. She spent nothing in particular. And at this event, it was really sweet. They presented me with a plaque that had a joint sort of like RASC and JAS hosting the event, which was really nice of them to do. They must have made it fairly like quickly, and it was really neat. But the big thing that they offered to do, this is the coolest thing I've ever had anybody offer to do, is translate the Observer's Handbook into Arabic. Yeah. They just straight up, they're like, we want to translate it. And I was like, this is a 300-page document that changes every year. And they're like, no, it's great. It's going to be great. It'll be great. We don't have this. We need this. We need to fill the market. Like, it'll be great. Dr. Sakaji also happened to found the Arab Union for Astronomy and Space Sciences, which is a whole thing across all of Arabia. So he has quite a big access to this fantastic network. And the fact that he was just sort of like, yeah, we'll do it. No problem. Was like so cool. So I called my boss. It was 3 a.m. in the Dubai airport, but it was a regular time in Canada. And I was like, hey, so we might be able to translate the handbook for the first time ever. And he was thrilled. I'm not sure if it's going to go through this year because, what a surprise, it takes a lot of effort to translate a handbook. And we need to work out copyright issues, and we need to figure out who's going to back translate it to make sure it's all good and safe and ready to go, and there's no mistakes because we already had mistakes in this issue. That was just English. So this makes it even trickier. But it's sounding like it's going to go through. They're really, really, really excited about it. And this is like the coolest thing we could possibly do. Absolutely not my area. I'm the youth outreach coordinator. But so cool. And I'm so excited about it. This was the sunset that night. And it was cool. Just as the sun was setting in Amman, I think it was just rising in Calgary. So I was texting one of our past board members and seeing how it was going over there. We had better weather here. Yeah. So that was probably the coolest thing that's happened so far at this job. It was really exciting. But I do want to tell you a little bit just about what I'm doing now, because I know that some people are curious about this. Some folks have been around for a while. They're kind of interested to see what's going on. I know some of you already joined for the seminar that we had a couple weeks ago, but for those who didn't, I'm going to talk about the robotic telescope project a little bit, because this is my baby and I'm really excited about it. And I've also spent a lot of time and sleepless nights on this. So first of all, I'm just going to do the basic introduction of the telescope. This is a telescope that we own in California. It has a, where did that thing go? It has a DSLR. Whoa, there we go. Has a DSLR piggybacked on it. And then the camera's back here with the filter wheel and the telescope itself. That's lit up by moonlight. And I'll give you some stats on it. So this is the view of the telescope. So if you see, this is where the Canon, the DSLR that's piggybacked on it will see. And this is what the telescope itself will see. And so if you took a photo at that spot with the DSLR, it would look like that. And if you took it with the CCD, it would look like that. So it's a pretty solid telescope. Yeah, this was not fair for me to have this project, because like, who gets to start in astrophotography with that? That's not fair. So the way I got into the RASC in the first place was that I met Ian Wheelband on a night that it was cloudy and we were supposed to have a star party, and we talked for like an hour about astrophotography, and it was wonderful. And I was like, I didn't even know you could connect cameras to telescopes. I didn't even know it was a possibility. And now I've been put in charge of this. So I had a lot to learn. Turns out the thing's really good at taking pictures, even if I'm not good at processing them. These were pictures taken with the telescope. This one was taken more recently. This was taken with the Canon, back when where Canon was close by. It's a pretty good telescope. This was my last attempt at anything related to the aquatic world. This was my one attempt at the Jellyfish Nebula, which I got wildly wrong. And no one hesitated to tell me. I don't know, I'm not great with colors, and I thought this was accurate. It's not. It should not be pink. I thought it was cute. Turns out I'd got the color scheme entirely wrong, and this is what it was supposed to look like. So I got a little bit better. This was obviously the first target that I chose to program, because why wouldn't I choose to program the jellyfish? And this was my very first attempt at editing any photos. Since then, I've tried a little bit harder, and I've still not done very well, so I'm not showing you any of the other photos that I've done. A lot of other people are much better than I am. But the thing with this telescope is that we wanted to use it to make astrophotography accessible, get some people doing science who wouldn't normally get to, so outside of universities, and use it to teach kids about space. I didn't know how to do any of that, so I had to figure it all out. And that was why I gave this a shot. I then had to learn how to image exoplanet transits, which is surprisingly not as difficult as you would expect. There's a website that tells you everything that you need to know. And essentially what we're looking for anybody who doesn't know how exoplanet transits work, is we have a star, and we're looking for the planet going in front of the star. So as the planet goes in front of the star gets a little bit dimmer, and then when it leaves, it gets brighter again. So what we're looking for is essentially this in the light. And this gave us all the information we needed to know in terms of where it was going to be, how long it was going to take, what time it was going to happen, the brightness of the star, the depth of the transit. This was a really big dip, which is good because we're on Earth, so it's easier to see it through the atmosphere. How long the planet takes to orbit, so it orbits every 1 3/4 days. And then it basically just programmed the telescope, set it up, let it do its thing. I did not get a photo of me programming the telescope, but I did take a screenshot of when I did the jellyfish. And this was right after I woke up at 5:55 in the morning. I was dying to see what was happening. You just sign onto your phone and see how it's going. And it was going really well, so you can see what's happening, you can see what the pictures are coming out like, and if it's going well. And then once you have all the pictures, you got to find the actual planet. So this is the map to find the planet. The star with the planet. This was the images that we took. This is upside down, or this is upside down, depending on your perspective. Flipping it around. That's our star, and it was right here. That's what we're looking for. This is like the step I have the most trouble with. I can't figure this out. I know 5-year-olds can, but I cannot get it right. I sit there and I'm like, I don't know, is it this way? Is it turn? Flip it again? So this is the part where I'm like, okay, high school students, you figure it out. And after that, you start to analyze. Now, I was doing this for high school students, and so I wanted to choose software that was going to be accessible to high school students. That doesn't cost $400 to use, and so I decided to use AstroImageJ, which is a free open source software that was made just for this purpose Pro tip, if you don't have to, don't use it. It was so difficult to learn. So I made tutorials so that nobody else has to go through having to learn how to use it again. So I spent like weeks trying to figure it out and then getting something wrong and then going to the person who was teaching me and being like, hey, wait a second, is this wrong? And he was like, oh, yeah, we should have done something else. And I'm like, I already had that tutorial up for 2 weeks and several people have already used it. Okay, so eventually it all spits it out looking like this. This is just essentially seeing the star at its regular brightness, the planet coming in front and going back out the other side, and then compared to other stars nearby. I know that we were talking just now about the most important often in astronomers' lives, the most important moment being when you see Saturn for the first time. But I would argue that figuring this out was the most important moment to me. And I feel so bad for my coworkers because I spent the whole day running around with my laptop being like, look, I did science! Look at what I accomplished! And they're like, yeah, we get it. Yeah, you're excited. And I'm like, no, but see the exoplanet, you see the exoplanet. Oh, it was a great day. And so that's what I want kids to feel. I want them to feel that excited about doing science. It was such a fantastic experience. I actually have had a couple students run through it, and we have, I think, like 11 classes doing it this semester, which is going to be busy. This was from some kids in Montreal. So they ran through the whole project. This was early stages when I didn't really know what I was doing. Again, one of those like, yeah, sure, I'll do it kind of moments. So I was still figuring it all out. And a volunteer from Montreal asked if his class could do it. He was at a CEGEP school. Some of you may have met him. His name's Kareem. Great guy. I felt really bad because I didn't want to just give it to the person who's with the RASC. I didn't want to show favoritism doing this. And so I went, all right, Kareem, you can do it, but I'm not helping, which was not the right approach. So he did the whole thing without asking me any questions, without having his students ask me any questions. I felt really badly about that. And then afterwards, they had the same sort of struggles as me with figuring out the data, but they got it perfectly. And they even learned how to put a trend line in. I hadn't figured that out yet. So they did a really, really good job. And what we ended up getting them to do was write about it. And so they wrote about it and they published it in Sky News. We're going to work on doing that as well in the journal, but basically giving kids a platform to actually write about science, either about their experience or about the actual data, depending on the platform. So that they can get something on their resume for the project that they've done, and they get a chance to understand how important that communication of what they've been doing is. Alrighty. Oh man, I feel like I'm moving too fast. I spoke really quickly. Oh well, I didn't tell you about the other stuff that I'm doing as well. So this is another big project that I've got on my plate right now, and I'm sharing this because it is open to everybody, and a lot of people are really interested in this stuff. So I'm working on throwing an Indigenous star party up on Manitoulin Island this summer, or this spring. It's going to be Ojibwe astronomy. And we have 3 really awesome speakers coming in, one of whom literally wrote the book on Ojibwe astronomy. If you see the book in our store, it's got a really long name, but it's about Ojibwe astronomy, and that's Annette Lee. And so she's going to be coming and doing a workshop with the high school students there. We're having several speakers throughout the evening talking about the stories and the creation and then the constellations that they have and giving tours of the night sky. There's going to be other cultural stuff going on too, so we've got a canoe launch and a couple guided hikes as well, and hopefully there's going to be a nice big meal at one point, which will be really fun. So this is open to everybody. I've had a lot of questions about people who are interested in Indigenous astronomy and don't know where to start. This is going to be a really great event. It is 6 hours away. I apologize, but I told you guys how much I like my cottage, and this is like 30 minutes from it. So not coincidence, that's for sure. It is a fantastic place, though. It's really, really, really dark up there. And it's going to be a really good time. So if anybody's interested in that, or if you know anyone who's interested in this sort of stuff, let them know. It's May 22nd to 23rd, which is the weekend after the long weekend. Just a heads up. That was a miscommunication on my part. I'm also working on some other stuff, so one of these will affect you guys a little bit. We're doing, I'm putting together an outreach training program that we're working with Ontario Parks to deliver. But I want to practice first. So I know that with Toronto Centre, a lot of people don't have experience doing outreach, and they're a little bit worried to start, and it can be a little intimidating. Actually, it's a problem we have pervasive throughout the society. Everybody has that issue of getting started doing outreach. So I talked to Ian Wheelband, and it sounds like we're going to work on some sort of training program in the GTA to give it a run first, doing rain day activities and daytime stuff and nighttime observing, star hopping, basic sort of how to tell a story and how to communicate with new astronomers. So I'm going to work with Ian on that. You'll be hearing about that over time, I'm sure. We just started getting a new youth astrophotography section in Sky News. For those of you who've been receiving Sky News, we have a new editor in. She just started with the March-April issue, and she's fantastic. She's really doing a great job at bringing in new people and having new columns and creating ideas like this. And so we've already got 4 youth members who are really excited about their astro photos and who have written up little pieces about how to do this stuff and why they do the things that they do. So we're working on that. I've sicked a whole bunch of young people on our Instagram account, which has been great. So we have a new Instagram account just for young people, or for our younger members, to encourage our younger members to join. I've encouraged things like astronomy memes and done stuff like that, which doesn't normally fit the national brand, but it's out there, so if you want to follow that. And the really exciting news is that starting tomorrow, we're going to have a co-op student in the office, which was another case of, hey, do you have co-op students? No, we don't. You want one? Sure. So this is a student who's coming. He actually wanted to work at the Science Center, but because they've got a little bit more bureaucracy involved, it didn't work out. So he's desperate to get involved in astrophysics, and he's going to start helping us out with a bunch of stuff. So if you have extra work that you want done, that's what co-op students are for. So I've had an absolutely fantastic time working my way through astronomy and welcoming new people in and being welcomed by people. Toronto Centre playing a big role in that because you were the ones who introduced me to space when you started coming and doing the solar observing and allowing me to take snakes to it and all that good stuff and showing that you could actually do astronomy in the city. I'd never really tried before, never occurred to me. So having that experience with Toronto Centre has been absolutely fantastic. It's so nice to keep working with you guys. I encourage you all to continue to agree to try new stuff, even if you don't think it's going to go well, and keep your mind open about how to all those things that come your way. Thank you all so much for having me. I think I spoke too fast and ran out of time, but that's okay. If you have lots of questions, I'm happy to take them now. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
I think most of us could probably sit here for a long period of time and listen to your exploits, jellyfish or otherwise. You're not out of the woods yet, so we're going to ask for questions at this point in time, and I promise to rescue you by 10 o'clock. I'm
going to briefly tell the story as the microphone makes its way over. I contacted Chris Vaughn at 9 p.m. on like a Wednesday one night and was like, I need your help. And he's like, what kind of astronomer would I be if I wasn't up at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday? And I really appreciated that. You saved my bacon and Alendria's that time, Chris. I really appreciated it.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
I actually met you. Peter and I called you the Snake Lady.
Oh, really? Oh, of course. Yeah.
Outside on the telescope.
Oh,
the telescope
yes.
one morning.
I'm so glad that Henry is my namesake. Yeah.
I just want to commend you on the great job you're doing
Thank you
for
so
the
much.
club so far and for the society. And it's not necessarily a question per se, but just you have great personality and charm and the whole works that go with it. So I just want to commend you and say continue doing the great job you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Oh. I almost threw this story in. When I first got the job, Ian Wheelband reached out to me and he was like, are you that girl who was like talking to me for like an hour about astrophotography? And I was like, are you you? And he's like, I can tell you by your response, it's you. Yeah. It was very sweet. Yeah. I really didn't talk about it.
I'll take just for a second while you slide that over to our esteemed Vice President over there. Harking back to that cold winter's evening of the lunar eclipse on the parking arcade, where, as you say, it was minus plenty, have you observed with your RASC duties on a colder occasion?
No, that was the coldest possible occasion. I don't know if I could convince myself to go out in colder than that. I mean, if you have a colder, do you have a colder option?
I'm hoping not, because it was awfully cold that night. You might also remember how those news media that you were trying to entertain, how they kept running into the stairwells to keep warm.
Yeah.
It was really rather humorous in that regard.
Oh, it was great. We'd run out and we'd be like, okay, here's a cool thing. Okay, back to the warm room.
That's right, which was a stairwell that was unheated, but compared to the top of the parking arcade, it was very warm.
Yeah, there were like 10 people in there. It was all the body heat. It was fine. It was great. Yeah, it was something.
Jenna, we're going to have to talk about this what's going on Manitoulin Island, because I don't know if you're aware of this, yet the Toronto Centre is running the outreach on the ferry.
Yes, I did know that. Yeah, actually, I'd seen that. I hadn't made the connection, but of course you are. I completely forgot about that. That would be great. It would be really cool to partner and work on something, because that's a week after the ferry starts running. Do you go up and do the outreach?
Probably will be.
Yeah?
I'll be doing some of it this year.
Okay, cool.
And some other folks probably will be as well.
We can definitely work something out. We should chat about that. There's a dark sky preserve on Manitoulin Island called Gordon's Park. And I believe the owners had some bad experiences with national, not office staff, representatives on occasions. So we've been trying to mend those fences a bit. I think they like center people. I don't think she's getting used to me, I think, because I am a lot. But she really likes Linda Pelaya from Sudbury. And we're working on sort of forming more of a partnership where we can work with them, because they have great facilities, and she's quite the business person. Her name's Rita Gordon. She is like really good at making stuff work. And is a lovely person. So yeah, let's work on a partnership like that. We'll figure out a way to make it work. That'd be great. She on a note of things that I did not say yes to, I actually I don't know if you guys know the Arrogant Worms. They had a song called Terry's Taxidermy and Mounted Animal Nature Trail, and that's what Gordon's Park used to be. And I went there as a kid when it was Terry's Taxidermy and Mounted Animal Nature Trail, and where he would Terry's hobby was stuffing animals, and then he'd have them on a trail and you could walk along and see the animals. I loved it as a kid. They've now turned it into a dark sky preserve, and I went to visit just to chat with them and see the place, and they took me on this big long tour, and we went out and looked for fossils and talked about the business and all that sort of stuff, and I was like, it took me 3 hours to figure out that was Terry from Terry's Taxidermy and Mounted Animal Nature Trail, and I had a small revelation to myself. And then they were chatting about it, and they were saying, like, why didn't you work here when you were a kid? Because I used to work at a park up there. They're like, why didn't you work here? You could have been running the place by now. And I was so close to saying, and it's for sale. And I was very close to saying, maybe, like, I could spend my whole time in the dark. It'd be perfect. But I did not say yes to that. I'm not ready to leave the city yet. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
This is a question from online.
Cool.
How's your knowledge of chemistry been applied to astronomy?
Oh, okay. So I have very limited knowledge of chemistry, but the biology, no, that's okay. So my knowledge of chemistry has barely been applied, although I did learn about emission spectra to be able to figure this stuff out. In terms of biology, the sort of interesting angle on this, I do think that it's really important to cover lots of entry points into astronomy, because everyone's coming from a different angle. Everybody has a different story of why they're interested in space. And so that was sort of what helped me figure out new paths for people to follow, and with biology and marine biology especially, that ties in really well to space exploration, because a lot of the habitats that happen underwater are basically the same ones that happen in space. So, you have to be self-contained, and you have to be aware of your body and where things are, and not dropping tools deep into the ocean. And so I think being able to advise people, or young people especially, who are like, I want to get into space, I want to do something space, I want to go be an astronaut, and it's like, this is a good way to start underwater, because a lot of people start there, and even the astronauts start there, actually. They have their mock-up underwater. That helped a lot. And just generally having that sort of like scientific curiosity, and being able to come up with questions and then answer them methodically has really helped as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about the robotic, the telescope?
Yeah, sure. So, do you have specific questions about it?
No, just general information.
Yeah. Okay. So the robotic telescope, we purchased it. The board of the RASC decided to purchase it before I started working here, and then when I got here, they'd been sort of developing the program a little bit, and trying to get it up and running so that members of the RASC could use the telescope to do astrophotography and science and stuff like that. But it hadn't quite gotten to the point where I was ready to take it over, and then I took it over, and so it was a little bit of a jump, and I wrote the business plan, and I figured it all out so that it would be making enough money to allow me to do outreach with it. It was very selfish of me. Just enough that I could do one night a week. And then the telescope is basically split up into evenings. So astrophotography will have a team of people that will decide what targets to choose and image and how to image them. And I think they do have standards in place for how long the images are going to be taken for, depending on the target. So I don't know if I can remember them off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that visible targets are about 9 hours, and narrowband targets are around 20. So they basically come up with rules by which to do things. And then there's the science team, which is just getting going, and that's looking at things like variable stars and exoplanets and stuff that we can see from on the ground, and maybe doing some more fun stuff as projects. We'll see how it goes. And the outreach is all the sort of sciencey side. Eventually, once we get a new database system in place, because right now we can't hook up our old database system to our new website, because then we'll just have to do it all again in 2 months. So we're waiting till we get the new database system in to start selling the memberships. And it'll be yearly, and I said this online, so I'll say it here as well. The memberships we have a couple tiers. The first tier is just for access to the data that's produced with the telescope all year long, the length of your membership, plus whatever's happened beforehand, because it's taken so long to get up and running. That's going to be $100 for the year for adults, and then $50 for students, because I'm in charge, and I want to make it accessible for kids. And then the science and astrophotography will each have their own teams, and participation on those teams involves choosing the targets, having a discussion group, and learning how to choose good targets, because I don't know how to do that yet. And that's something I think is important, how to program telescopes, how to use the software. It's going to be much more hands-on and more of a learning experience and sort of forming a community. And for that, we're looking at, let's hope I get this right, $300 for the year for adults and $150 for students. Again, 50% discount because I'm the youth outreach coordinator. And then when I was originally coming up with this, I set it a limit for how many people could be on those teams, because I realized that the more people who are on the teams, the less fun it is. Like, the less you have a say in what's happening with the telescope. And, the more people are flooding this comment section, trying to figure out what's going on. And then someone else who's been helping me with the transition into becoming the project lead was like, you don't have that problem yet. Why are you trying to solve it? And I thought, fair enough. So we'll see how many people take it up. And if it becomes overrun, we'll fix it as we go. We're taking a very, let's see how it goes, and we'll fix it as we go, and we're going to learn from the experience kind of approach, because we've never done this before. It's brand new, so we have a lot to learn. I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping that long run, this means that we'll be able to get a separate telescope that we can use just for outreach, because I'm selfish. And I'm hoping that can be housed in Australia so that students can actually use it during the daytime. Because right now, when I program in their data, they get to watch. I'll send them out a Zoom link, and they can join, and they can ask questions as I enter it, and I go through, how to set it. It's essentially coding, so it's like, move the telescope to here, and then take this many photos, and then move it again, and then take this many photos. So they get to watch that whole process. But I'm hoping that they can actually participate in it if we have a telescope that's set up that works during the daytime here and the nighttime in Australia. That is my dream. I don't know if we'll get there, but I'd love to do that.
Wonderful, Jenna. Thanks for coming. What sort of projects could student groups do? I loved your presentation of the occultation of the star by an exoplanet, etc. Mm-hmm. And what other projects can you do? And is there any resource for student clubs, say in high schools or CJEPs, that they can do? So
right now, that is the only project I have, because I've only just learned how to do it. This is all since November, so it's been a pretty short order in learning this. I did get a very long email from one of the people on the science team as to a myriad of projects that we could do, and I understood 2 of them, so I got to take a minute to figure out this stuff. And it was long-term projects, observing one thing every couple months or once a month anyway, it was big long-term things, which don't make sense for schools or clubs really, because that's not their time scale. So exoplanets work really well because it's literally just one night. That's all you need, is just one night of data. And so they can build up to it. I have a forum that they fill out so that they know exactly, from that website, exactly what's important and why we're writing it all down. And then it ends up taking about 6 class sessions. So when I first started it, I thought I would use it in classrooms exclusively. I thought that would be the demographic that'd be interested in it. It's not, especially not classrooms that are about to go on strike. So that went down the drain a little bit in Ontario. And it did work in some other places. I worked in Montreal, and now we've got Alberta and Saskatoon on board. What seems to be working really well is final projects, like kids doing these term projects. And then they're much more invested in the outcomes, so they spend a lot of time digging in and figuring this stuff out. They're not required to, it's just like, it's the project that they chose, right? So that's what makes them excited about it. So that also works really well for clubs. And the plan is to, as much as possible, do as much outreach as we can with that one free night. It's always gonna be free, so it's easy enough to get clubs to be interested in it. I don't want it to cost anything. I've never wanted it to cost anything. That's not the point of outreach. It's set up now that we have, I'm just in the process of working with an individual who's making some slides with me that can be used consistently when we Skype into classrooms to introduce the project and talk about exoplanets. And then I'm going to train some volunteers to be able to do that. So it's not just me going into all the classrooms. And then hopefully it'll be sort of at that point where it can kind of run steadily for a little while, and we can prove that it's effective and that kids are enjoying it. And then that's when we can really start moving into new territory. I want to make sure that we're comfortable where we are first, because I'm only just barely comfortable now, and I'd like for more people than just me to be comfortable. I'd like to have a couple other people doing the outreach first. But then we'll get there. If you have suggestions for science projects, let me know. Alrighty.
Testing. On that note, there's one thing that you have oodles of, and that's enthusiasm. And that becomes infectious, and that's a wonderful trait to have. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I'm going to hand you back to Ralph. Thank you again.
Don't go away, Jenna. Well, certainly, you're a breath of fresh air. It's great to have such enthusiasm, and it's enthusiasm like that is infectious. Well, that's a bad thing to say these days, isn't it? but really, it is something to see, this kind of enthusiasm, because it is one of the things that in science education we sometimes are missing. And so I think all of us here share your enthusiasm and hope that you will succeed admirably in what you're doing. So thank you very much for showing us a little bit about what you do and some of your experience that got you here. And I would like to just present this little token of appreciation to you. Thank you very much for coming out and talking to us tonight.
Thank you.
By way of the forum. If you do have any concerns about that or suggestions, please contact me directly through email. There's the website with the email facility there. It's probably best not to raise questions on the forum itself. because that will be a distraction, and this is the kind of thing where until we need to act on it or say something official, it's something that should not really be discussed in public until we have to. But please be aware that we are aware of the problem, and we are thinking about how to mitigate situations so that the CAO can continue to operate without problems. The other thing is that goes along with that, obviously there are going to be events going on like the Messier Marathon that's being proposed for later this month, and the various other outreach kinds of events that we host at the CAO and the other events. And again, all of these things are part and parcel of the consideration. So again, if we have to address things, we will do that. Another thing that has come up recently, which you should be aware of, is that for many years we've had an arrangement for the wintertime operation at the CAO for parking on the roadway or just alongside the roadway up at the top of the hill overlooking the property. We've run into a snag this winter about that. Again, the CAO committee has just become aware of this problem. We had a scout group up there, I think it was last weekend, and unfortunately everybody who left a car on the roadway got ticketed. And it was totally unexpected, and it's a combination of things which happened which led to this situation. We are trying to, again, problem solve it and come up with a way of making sure that this doesn't happen again. But again, it's something that we have to deal with, and there is some bureaucracy to deal with at the town level. And so again, as we come up with a solution, we'll let you know about it. But again, it's one of the things that you should be aware of. We're trying to solve that problem so that it won't be an issue for the Messier Marathon. But again, just watch out. Blake Nancaro is organizing that event, and he will probably be the person who announces the arrangements if we can get those set up in time. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at some of the events going on over the next few weeks. And our next meeting is in 2 weeks. It's the Recreational Astronomy Night on March 25th. We have two of the speakers who are in the expected lineup for the canceled meeting in February. So Andy Beaton is going to be presenting The Sky this month, and Brian Charnock will be doing his talk on what does football have to do with astronomy and the GMT. And I'm still trying to figure that one out. Hopefully we'll find out about that. Also, we have one open slot available, so if any of you would like to talk about a favorite project or something else, travel to Petra, Jordan, etc., with an astronomical flavor, please contact Paul Markov about that. He'll be happy to slot you in. We did have a speaker lined up for April 15th, but unfortunately, concerns about COVID-19 intervened and our speaker canceled. So we have our usual world-famed substitute TBA. And we will try and come up with another speaker in time for 2 weeks from now to actually let you know about a new speaker and topic. But it was unfortunate that the speaker pulled the plug just today. And Paul had to email me at midday and say, change the talk, change your slides because we no longer have a speaker. So there we are. It's just one of those things that happens. And in the usual way of we can't rustle up somebody else, well, it looks like Paul and I will be having a discussion about who gets to talk. Something like that. Anyway, there will be a speaker, but hopefully we'll know in 2 weeks. Okay, other things going on. We have the next solar observing session at the telescape happening on Saturday, April the 4th. And hopefully the weather will cooperate like it did the last event. Finally, a break in the clouds, so nobody buy a telescope or an observatory, please. In the usual way, Sean is going to give the go or no-go signal either Friday night or first thing Saturday morning to let you know whether it's on or not, and it'll also be put onto the usual social media. Okay, other things going on. We have our monthly evening star parties, the Dark Sky Star Party, first clear night of the week of 23rd of March, except for the Wednesday night, which is the meeting night. And again, hopefully the skies will start to cooperate for us. And then the following week, the first clear night will be at Bayview Village Park for the city star parties. And again, Adrian is going to be hosting those events and will be making the call, go or no go, in the mid to late afternoon. So again, in the usual channels on the website as well as our media. Okay, first light is going on. The first session was tonight. It's going on simultaneously with this meeting, and we have 2 more sessions for first light. So there is still room in the meeting room next door. So again, this is particularly aimed at new members. And if you are interested in joining into First Light, you can register online still on the website. Okay, Adrian does need some help with organizing the observing workshops, the dark sky and city star parties. So again, I've put this slide on previously, but if any of you can help him out, again, it would be greatly appreciated. It just helps to spread the load around and make sure that Adrian can actually get in to do some other things that he has to do for us as well. So again, please talk with Adrian if you can help him out. We are in that season where we are starting to think about how to recognize members who have done something special, either personally or for the center. We have 5 awards that are available to recognize individual members. And again, the information on these awards is on the website. And we have actually put the announcement onto the forum, and we actually have 1 nomination already. But we'd like more. So again, if you know of anybody who you'd like to recognize, please let Tony Horvatin know. He's the chair of the nominations and awards committees. And the due date for those nominations is March 31st. And again, you don't necessarily have to write the citation, but just give us an idea of who it is you would like to nominate and why, and we'll have a conversation with you and then write up the citation with you or for you. But we do need to have some ideas about people to recognize, please. Again, going back to the Carr Observatory, remember it is available, and you know, it's not got a supervisor on site until the road opens up in late April or early May, but you can use the place with the caveat about parking. And you know, the Sulora Observatory, our imaging observatory, is available for your use if you're on the site. So again, please feel free to use that facility. If you don't want to go up to the Carr Observatory to use the telescopes there, we have a lot of telescopes in town. And 2 of our telescope loan managers are in the audience tonight. And again, if anybody would like to borrow a telescope, please speak to Mark or George to make the arrangements. We've got lots of instruments available to you to use. And finally, an invitation to join us at the Granite Brew Pub down at Mount Pleasant and Eglinton after the meeting for a drink and a bite to eat. And that's it for the announcements, unless somebody else has anything to add. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, I did mention the card at the beginning of the meeting, the card for Wayne Gilbank's memory. Please sign that as you leave. And again, thank you very much for coming tonight, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time.